just drift away from me, feeling my mind, it's drifting out to sea. I wanna smile again before I'm gone. Can we get back to where we used to be? Do we all feel the same?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jeff Leaf. I want to welcome you to the Cleveland Sports 360 show with your host, LG.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another action-packed hour of the Cleveland Sports 360 show. We got a lot to cover and a little bit of time left to do it. Today is the first Monday following the Cleveland Browns draft that just ended. It was the first draft with the new regime in place, and we already know how much trouble the new regime is having with the Cleveland Browns. It's possible, if the right charges get filed and Jimmy Haslam III gets convicted of this crime, the federal government could come in and cease the Cleveland Browns. Did you hear that, folks? The federal government could come into Cleveland and cease the Cleveland Browns. They can take control of the Cleveland Browns. In about a minute or so, we should be hearing from Paul, the president of the Berea Browns backers. We're going to get his thoughts on the NFL draft, how the Browns did. And we're going to hear from J-Rack Daddy from the Sports Fix right after the 7:15 break right here on the Cleveland Sports 360 show. If you didn't notice, yesterday the Cleveland Indians played a doubleheader against the Kansas City Royals, who are in first place in the American League Central. And your Cleveland Indians and my Cleveland Indians didn't fare well at all in the first game. Justin Masterson suffered his second loss of the season as the Indians fell to the Royals in Game 1, 9-0. The second one that started at 8 p.m. last night, 8:10 to be exact, in Kansas City, featured Corey Kluber, who picked up a win, number 2 on the year. The Indians' offense came alive and smoked the Royals 10-3. Tonight, the Tribe takes to the field again in Kansas City to finish this series against the first-place Royals. The Indians are in last place, folks. We need some wins, and we need to start winning consistently. Tonight, Ubaldo Jimenez takes to the mound again. Ubaldo. What we need to be concerned about is which Jimenez is going to show up in the Cleveland Indians uniform. One day he pitches fantastically, the next day not so good. Unfortunately, he's due for one of those not-so-good outings tonight, but let's pray and let's hope that Ubaldo Jimenez can take to the mound and get the job done with the Cleveland Indians facing the Kansas City Royals. It'd be really nice to get another win out there in KC and show the Major League Baseball that the Cleveland Indians are for real and they can produce some offensive numbers to be proud of 2 days in a row. We didn't see it 2 games in a row, as we already know. 9-0 in the first game. Masterson suffered his second loss of the season, and Kluber came in for Game 2, and the Tribe's offense beat up on the Kansas City pitching staff 10-3 for the second game. If you didn't notice, this was the NFL draft weekend, folks. We had a hellacious draft. It all depends how you look at it. What really bothers me, LG, is the guy that Jimmy Haslam chose to put in charge of the Cleveland Browns, Joe Banner. Joe Banner is notorious for saving a nickel in the National Football League. He's has a long history of with the Philadelphia Eagles. He came in to run the Cleveland Browns as soon as Jimmy Haslam bought the team last year for $1.1 billion from Randy Lerner, who still owns 30% of the team, and who knows with these federal charges what Haslam's going to go through. Today, a judge ruled this morning that a restraining order could not be filed against Jimmy Haslam's Pilot Flying J Corporation. I repeat that. The judge came back today and ruled that a restraining order could not be filed. Let me just read a little bit about what the judge said. A judge ruled this morning that Jimmy Haslam can keep calling trucking customers and working to settle with them over allegations that Haslam's family business, Pilot Flying J, defrauded them on fuel rebates. A clerk said today that Knox County, Tennessee Circuit Judge Harold Wimbley denied a request for a temporary restraining order by a tiny trucking company from Hazelhurst, Georgia, who attempted to keep Haslam, who also owns the Browns, from reaching out to businesses linked to the federal investigation involving Pilot Flying J. Ladies and gentlemen, if that was me, you, or Jeff Leaf back there behind the wheels of steel, we'd be in jail right now for tampering with federal witnesses. How in the world can they let this guy? Now Haslam's attorney came out and made a statement and said, by no way is Jimmy Haslam trying to get these trucking companies to sign a release from legal liabilities when he's trying to settle with these companies. But you know what? There's a 120-page indictment that was, or not indictment, but a 120-page affidavit that was filed with the court from the FBI IRS investigation into the Pilot Flying J truck stop empire that the Haslam family owns. In case you don't know this, Jimmy Haslam's brother is the governor of the state of Tennessee. The court paperwork was filed in the state of Tennessee today. I think these court papers should possibly be filed in the state where the trucking company resides. There could be a change of venue, maybe, consideration here, because who in their right mind is going to rule against a Haslam outside, in the state of Tennessee? As I said, his brother is the governor of the state of Tennessee, and he already stepped aside. He wanted to make it perfectly clear that all his interests in the Pilot Flying J Corporation are in a blind trust. In other words, folks, he has no idea what goes on with that company down there at Pilot Flying J, and the next thing you know, he's coming out and he's saying that the problem is that his stuff's in a blind trust, and next thing you know, he doesn't want any involvement with his brother or the family business. But that's the way it goes, folks. When you got billions of dollars, I guess you're allowed a few more liberties than the regular people are trying to be. You and I don't get the same liberties that these billionaires get. And the next thing you know, we're going to see Haslam, he's going to have to skate through the whole court case. Can the federal government come in and take control of the Cleveland Browns? Hey, anything's possible. It all depends on what kind of money we're talking. And, I'm sure Pilot Flying J pumps enough diesel fuel on a daily basis to put quite a few bucks in the bank every single day of every month. So it's going to be hard to say which charges are specifically going to be aimed at Pilot and Flying J. A grand jury is going to meet. They're going to discuss this case. And next thing you know, there should be some kind of
LG
indictment handed down. Yeah.
LG, can you hear me?
Sure, I can hear you.
All right. You know what? There's another thing. I don't follow a lot of sports, as you know, but I enjoy the sports. Now, I thought I heard somebody say that if he faced a federal crime, that the NFL could possibly take over the Browns, and they could possibly take the team and move them somewhere else. I don't know. You know more about that?
Well,
I'm just going by hearsay.
I'm not so sure that the NFL would come in and move the Cleveland Browns somewhere else. There's a lot of hearsay going around about Jimmy Haslam's motive behind buying the Cleveland Browns. I've even seen one guy publish a thing talking about moving the Cleveland Browns to Los Angeles, so they were going to be called the Los Angeles Browns. You never know with a guy like Haslam. People thought this is a new regime coming into Cleveland. There was a lot of excitement at August of last year in 2012 when Haslam was. They thought to themselves, the Browns fans, finally we got a guy that came in, bought the Cleveland Browns, and he's going to turn this thing around. We're going to get some quality players. We're going to get some big-time free agents in the Cleveland. Well, we did. We got a couple of guys that were worth talking about with Kruger and the guy from the the Raiders, the Oakland Raiders. I got to remember they keep moving out there in Oakland. But other than that, I mean, we got a good guy in the draft. We took Bartavius Mingo, and Mingo came in, and he's a big threat. He likes to eat the quarterback. The first-round spotlight of the draft, I mean, the Cleveland Browns were offered a trade from the Rams. I want to say the Los Angeles Rams, but I'm showing my age. They haven't been in Los Angeles in quite a few years. But the St. Louis Rams wanted to give the Browns, it would have even included a second-round draft pick, which the Browns didn't have. And going back to who Haslam put in charge of the Cleveland Browns, Joe Banner came out last night in his press conference after the draft, and he said that Josh Gordon, now get this, Josh Gordon, who was a great rookie receiver with the Cleveland Browns, you got to remember this is a guy that missed an entire season of college football due to a suspension from the use of marijuana. Now, there's states where marijuana is legal in now, so I don't know if the NFL or the colleges they're probably still going to crack down on these players because they don't want drug use, period. But here's a guy that sat out of football for an entire collegiate year, didn't play the game, comes into Cleveland, grabs 50 passes for 805 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Joe Banner's putting him on the watch list this season, saying he's got to prove himself. He's got to prove that he's worth the second-round pick we gave up last year for this year's draft. I guess Joe Banner was kind of burnt that they didn't have a second-round draft pick. But to put Josh Gordon on the watch list, a guy that came in, grabbed 50 passes for 805 yards and 5 touchdowns in a rookie season, I think Josh Gordon had a phenomenal year. He showed brilliance of flash last season. I think he's only going to get better this season. The Browns' offense, I mean, Brandon Weeden definitely had a problem staring down his receivers. It looked like the defense was cueing in on Weeden's eyes. Weeden has a problem with staring down the receivers. I don't know if he's going to be over that problem under Norv Turner's watchful eye this season or not. You got to remember, baseball was Brandon Weeden's game, and what does a pitcher do? He stares at the pitcher, the catcher's mitt while he's on the pitcher's mound, and he concentrates on hitting that target. I mean, obviously the target in football, it's a little bigger than a catcher's mitt. You still got to thread the ball in between the defenders. You still got to throw it down the field. But when you're staring your guy down, you're giving the defensive backs time to cue in where that pass is going to go. That could have been a big contributing factor to a lot of Brandon Weeden's interceptions last year. As we all know, he had more interceptions than touchdowns. I don't think he's going to be able to turn that around quite so easily with the staring down of the receiver. If he cues in on it this year, his career in Cleveland can be short-lived. I think Jason Campbell is a capable guy. I don't think he's, some people say he's only a backup. But don't forget, he had a great season going in Oakland. He was 4-2 when the Browns hit him and broke his collarbone 2 seasons ago. He was on a roll. Who knows what Jason Campbell would have did with the Oakland Raiders before the collarbone injury. It's going to be interesting this fall to see who the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback is. If Brandon Weeden doesn't have a successful camp, and if Brandon Weeden doesn't have a successful preseason, I would expect Chudzinski, who's in his first year and wants to make a good showing for the Cleveland Browns, to start Jason Campbell. I don't see what he has to risk. Why put Weeden out there? He's a former first-round draft pick. People already know Weeden had no business being in the first round of the Cleveland Browns draft. It's that simple. But it's going to be interesting to see what these new guys. We picked up a defensive back, McFadden. Leon McFadden has ties to the Cleveland Browns. He played at San Diego State, where Brian Sipe is a quarterback coach, and back in the Sipe days, we won football games, folks. We all remember the Cardiac Kids for those of us who lived back then. A lot of the Browns fans today don't even recall a winning football team because they've never been able to see one. But the Cardiac Kids were a thrilling football team. They won a lot of games in the last minute of the game. These guys took to the field, and even with Brian Sipe at quarterback, they realized they could win. They thought they were going to win. The confidence this guy had was phenomenal. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back with more of the Cleveland Sports 360 show. Joining us live via the phone lines will be J-Rock Daddy himself from the Sports Fix. So don't turn that dial. Stay right here for more of the Cleveland Sports 360 show right here on StreamingSportsTalk.com. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Cleveland Sports 360 show. I'm your host, LG, and joining us via the phone line right now from the west side of Cleveland, Ohio, is J-Rock Daddy himself from the Sports Fix every Saturday night. Big J-Rock, can you hear me, man?
Hey, what's up, LG? How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, J-Rock Daddy. What's going on in your world, buddy?
Nothing much, man.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Nothing much.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, man. Hey, Leaf, just turn that gain down a little on that phone line, man. He's just a little over-ovulated or whatever you want to call it, modulated or ovulated.
Hey, I haven't been ovulated in years, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're due. You're due, right? Hey, so J-Rock, man, obviously we had a little bit of a disappointing NFL draft this year. We put more picks away for next year, and Joe Banner and the Cleveland Browns, Chudzinski, these guys, they use the famous saying, there's always next year in Cleveland. I mean, come on, J-Rock Daddy. How long do you think it's going to be before the Browns can put a consistent winning football team together on the field, man?
Well, I mean, I think that's yet to be seen, you know. I think if I'm a Browns fan, what's probably more disheartening about this year's draft, it's not the players that they drafted or the trades that they made, although, God, who makes a trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers? I just don't get that one. But
well, what was it? Back in 1968, right? 68, we got Bill Nelson from the Steelers.
Yeah, that's the last time, you know. But, I mean, my thing is more disappointing than that is since Joe Banner and Jimmy Haslam were installed on top of this thing. I mean, if you remember, at first, at the end of the season, the talk was the Browns already have a core, and we think that we're just a few pieces away from being a good team, and we're going to add to this team, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's more the way they changed that. And now they openly admit, yeah, we're going to stink for a couple more years, but we're going to get there soon. And it's just, the thing is we already knew that, and everybody in Cleveland knew that in October. But Jimmy Haslam and Joe Banner proceeded to tell us what they thought we wanted to hear rather than being honest. And I think that is starting to be the calling card of these guys, is telling people what they think they want to hear and not being honest.
Well, when we talk about being honest and we talk about the Cleveland Browns, we have to talk about the Cleveland Browns owner, Jimmy Haslam III, J-Rock Daddy. Now, a lot of people are trying to avoid the situation. I just heard today, believe it or not, that if the proper charges get filed against the Pilot Flying J Corporation, and if Jimmy Haslam himself gets charged with something, the federal government could come in and seize the Cleveland Browns right away from Jimmy Haslam. Have you heard that?
Yeah, but that's really being blown out of proportion, because in all honesty, the only way that happens is, number one, like you said, the correct, certain, specific charges have to be filed. Jimmy Haslam has to be found guilty of them, and you have to be able to prove that this man, who was already very wealthy, used that money specifically to buy the Cleveland Browns. Then it could be forfeited, much like in a drug case or a big FBI seizure like that.
Now, one thing that you have to admit, J-Rock, this is one of the few occasions in NFL history where the NFL allowed the buyer of the Cleveland Browns, which paid $1.1 billion, to finance most of this money. I mean, why do you think a guy like Jimmy Haslam would finance most of this money? Is there a possibility that this guy knew something was coming up? He took out, financing this big purchase with the Cleveland Browns, so they couldn't.
I disagree there. He didn't know this was coming, because if he did, he would have tried to cover his tracks. He didn't. I do believe that Jimmy Haslam had no idea that this raid was coming. You could tell by reading the indictment, all 119 pages of it. You can tell that this was a very well-orchestrated, several-year operation by the federal government, and it was so strategic. They knew what they were talking about, to the point that when they raided the building, they walked right up to where things were. They knew where everything they wanted was. They had it that well mapped out. That's why I say Jimmy Haslam's in trouble, because when you get to that point with the feds, this isn't the local cops. This isn't just a tax issue, although you now you have a tax issue, you have possible wire fraud issues if the Postal Service gets involved. But when the feds come at this level, they're not asking you questions because they don't know. They're just going to see if you're going to lie to them or not, because they already know the answer.
And the funny thing is that they took Jimmy Haslam's personal computer right out of his office, too. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of email communications took place between Haslam and his sales force, who conveniently got put on extended leaves for the time being. But,
LG, we can all point back to it. I think you were on my show around the time that, the last time you were on, I think we were talking about it, but you can point to when Jimmy Haslam stepped back into being the CEO of Pilot Flying J, after he had stepped down, we all looked at each other and said, isn't that kind of strange that he went back so quick? But I think that's part of this whole thing. I think we don't know exactly why, but I think that's part of all this.
He had to have some kind of a situation happening to abruptly leave the Cleveland Browns like he did and step back. He hired the former Pepsi CEO to take care of Pilot and Flying J, so you couldn't say that there wasn't a capable CEO. But the key thing that you mentioned earlier in your conversation tonight, J-Rock, this is several years of an investigation. This isn't just several months. So we go back.
And it's not just witness testimony. They've got wiretaps. They've got recordings. This is like a mafia case, like a RICO case.
Absolutely, because it borderlines on racketeering too, man. You're messing with the truck drivers, you're messing with the Teamsters, you're messing with a lot of people's livelihoods here. So
and plus the antitrust. That's the whole reason that they have to make these deals with these smaller companies, is when they merged the Pilot and the Flying J companies together, they had to agree to make certain concessions for these smaller companies, because what they really did was created a monopoly on the market.
Absolutely. But I want to bring something up that's pretty interesting. Today, a judge ruled that the companies that were trying to get a restraining order filed against Jimmy Haslam or anybody from the Pilot Flying J Corporation from contacting them were struck down by a judge down in Knoxville, Tennessee, J-Rock. Now, you know as well as I do, if you or I went out and started talking to federal witnesses to try to settle with them while an ongoing investigation is happening and the grand jury hasn't even met yet, we'd be in trouble for witness tampering, don't you think?
Yeah, it does, and I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that we don't know about. It's easy for us to speculate this and that, but, the Haslams are a big deal in the Knoxville and in the Tennessee area. They have a lot of connections. You wonder how much of that could be politically motivated, but I agree with you. On the surface, that seems like witness tampering, but then you also, and I've heard this question brought up, and I'm curious, doesn't when Pilot offers to recompensate you for the fraud, isn't that admitting that the fraud took place? That's what's kind of confusing to me. Is if they offer, if they say, hey, LG, we ripped you off of $100 and we want to get it back to you, don't they theoretically have to admit that they ripped you off in order to give you your money back?
Absolutely, man. That's an admission of guilt right there. You're absolutely correct. I mean, why would you give somebody?
I don't know. It's just weird. It's very strange. Only in Cleveland, LG.
that's about the size of it. But first, you do have to admit, Jimmy Haslam came out and said we did nothing wrong. Now you're
at first. It's part of what I talked about with lying. At first, if you remember, the very first day, the Monday that the raid came down, there was all the distractions with the Boston Marathon bombing and different things. But if you remember, Jimmy Haslam said they didn't even know why the feds were there.
Right, exactly.
Then the next day, when the indictment came out and was made public, then all of a sudden they knew everything about it. And it's like, it again follows my... Jimmy Haslam he'll smile to your face, but he's a salesman, man. I don't think you can trust him at face value. I just don't.
Well, one thing people don't realize about Jimmy Haslam is this is a guy that was born on third base, J-Rock. I mean, come on, man. His dad made this giant, his dad started Pilot Flying J with not Flying J because they bought that in a bankruptcy sale, but he started Pilot with one gas station in the Tennessee area. He built this into so Jimmy Haslam, in essence, was born on third base, J-Rock. All he had to really do.
Because I don't know about you, but I was born in the dugout, if that's the case, man.
Absolutely.
I was the bullpen.
Right, absolutely. But, he's born on third base. All he had to do was walk home. He did not hit a triple to get himself to where he is in life right now. Everything was handed to Jimmy Haslam by his family. His brother already took a step back and said, listen, folks, all my holdings in the Pilot Corporation are in a blind trust because he's the governor of the state of Tennessee, so he can't be involved with the family business while he's running the state. But, politically motivated, you might have a point with this judge in Tennessee that struck down this restraining order, J-Rock. It's awful funny. I would like to see a change of venue taking place.
Well, I mean, and I'm not even saying that in a bad way. If you remember when Art Modell moved the Browns, of course the Browns won every court case that they brought here in Cleveland because you had a biased, pool, even though you're not supposed to be biased. They didn't fare so well on the national hearings. You know what I mean? It's just, that's the way it works. But yeah, it does make you wonder. I mean, the Haslam name is very influential down there, and that is so odd that they would be allowed to contact potential grand jury witnesses.
Yeah, that's just incredible, and we're going to see what's going to happen within the next coming days. I think the legal escalations are just starting for Jimmy Haslam. But let's get a little bit into this Brown draft, J-Rock.
Yeah, let's talk about that draft. Because I'm telling you what, I wanted to bring up, obviously the marquee is your first pick, your number 6, Marcavius Mingo. And, my thing is, check this out. I've heard so many different comparisons, but some people that I trust. I've heard, obviously a lot of people have made the Cameron Wimbley comparisons, but, Dr. Football, you remember he was calling the Sports Fix, Bill Checkers, he tells me, he goes, man, this guy's got the potential to be a DeMarcus Ware, and you hear that, and you're like, man, wow, if I get half of DeMarcus Ware, I'm happy with that. But then you look at him and you realize that he's got a lot of development to do. I just don't think the number 6 pick should have a lot of development to do. I think they could have traded back and still got a Jarvis Jones or another player that would have fit a role. I mean, hey, I hope that the Mingo eats the baby every Sunday during the football season. But I'm just saying, I think there were options. But that's what they wanted. They said all along that was their guy.
Well, we passed right over to Honey Badger. We could have had the Honey Badger, and we didn't take him. I think Haslam put Joe Banner in charge of the Cleveland Browns, and I think one of the situations is anybody that's associated with any kind of, because he comes out with a little bit of a hard-on today against, Josh Gordon. Now Joe Banner's going, Josh Gordon has this season to prove to us that he was worth the second-round draft pick last year. Now, come on, J-Rock.
Brandon Whedon's got less than that to prove he was worth a first. But, you can't tell me the character is why they didn't take Tyrann Mathieu because they took Amani Bryant sold weed last season during the football season. You know what I mean? So it's not like you didn't take guys with character issues,
Well, there's something wrong with the reasons why they do what they do, but I just think it's kind of comical that
Groves went on Craigslist, LG, and got himself some female companionship.
Right.
For an extra $20, he got to knock on the back door.
Right. But that's the key. I mean, in the old days, the team would have took care of those needs for the players.
I'm just saying, they're not exactly, the church-going 24 here we're talking about,
right.
Man. I mean,
right. But one thing that bothers me a little bit about Mingo, and I see him hand him a jersey with the number 51 on it, I still can't help but to think of Eddie Johnson when I see the number 51. And I wrote a nice article over the weekend, J-Rock, saying, did the Browns know what they were doing when they handed the number 51 to Bartavius Mingo? Because that was the assassin. And you know what's unbelievable, J-Rock? That Eddie Johnson's son left a comment on that article because he said one of his friends sent him the article and he was flattered. Him and his sisters were both flattered that somebody from Cleveland would still consider 22 years later, Eddie Johnson is part of the Cleveland Browns family. I said, what are you kidding me? Eddie Johnson, to me, was one of the big-time, all-time linebackers that ever played for the Cleveland Browns. And when you hand a number 51 to a guy like Bartavius Mingo, does he know what kind of shoes he's got to fill to wear that number 51 the way Eddie Johnson did, J-Rock?
Yeah, but you know what? That stuff doesn't. It doesn't. It should, but that stuff doesn't matter to a lot of these guys because they don't know. And I don't think the Browns, honest to God, this is the 2013 Joe Banner, Mike Lombardi Browns. I don't think they even, Mike Lombardi maybe could call back to that era and remember number 51, but the rest of them, I don't think that even dawned on anybody, to be totally honest with you.
Well, it dawned on LG, I'll tell you that much. I got to tell you one other thing, J-Rock Daddy. I'm a little bit concerned about the size of Mingo. I think he's a little bit light, man. He may need to put on a few extra pounds to play in the NFL. What's your thoughts on that?
You know what? I see that. I was, the presser. He definitely looked light on that frame, but he says he can play it that way. Who knows? They all say a million things. Trent Richardson told you he was healthy last year. When so I mean, you have all those issues. Everybody's perfect now until they get to play, but we'll find out about that. The thing is really, in all honesty, putting on weight is not a major issue for most football players. So you'd rather have to deal with putting on weight than trying to take off weight.
Oh, absolutely. So, I would love to have that problem.
But I think that worst case scenario, I think Cameron Lindley is the perfect example of what he could be. He could be a 10-sack guy, in this defense especially. I think it just depends. If they line him up, if they put Paul Kruger on the side of the tight end and they give Mingo more of the free side, then I think that he could be very, very, very successful. I think he's got some development. And here's the other reason why I'm a little bit worried about him. But these are professional coaches, and you've got to trust that they can do this, is I can't stand when you take a guy at one position in college and then shift him over in the pros at such a high pick because you're shifting him from defensive end to linebacker,
Right.
I mean, for every DeMarcus Ware you can point out to me and say, hey, he could be this guy, I'll point out Clifford Charlton. You know what I mean? And I'll say he could also be that guy because Clifford Charlton was supposed to be the mad dog in the meat bar. Mike Junkin, you know what I mean? But
right.
Either one of those guys, they're interchangeable, and that's what I worry about. But I think no matter what, you got yourself a guy who's going to get you 5 to 10 sacks rushing the passer, I just don't know if he was worth a quote-unquote number 6 pick. But he is now, because that's what they spent him on him, you know?
Well, there was a lot of talk going around that the Rams wanted to trade draft picks with the Cleveland Browns, and then there was talks that the Jets would have never let this Mingo guy go past the 9th pick. So the Jets, I think, what they have, the 9th and the 13th pick in the draft.
See, look at the trade that was made, you know? I mean, the Browns theoretically could have made that same trade, but I truly think they could have traded back into the second round and still got Jarvis Jones. I just think Jarvis Jones, think about it, okay? Before all the questions about his neck and all the concerns about the stenosis, people were talking about him for number 6 for the Browns. They were saying,
I think I even wrote a couple.
Jones was a guy that a lot of people wanted. Now, after the doctors cleared him, he never climbed back up into that top of the draft like he was before. But the doctors cleared all that. I think the Steelers got the pick of the first round in Jarvis Jones at what was it, 17, 18, whatever they got
Don't you think, the Steelers have a knack for doing that, J-Rock? It just kills me.
I mean, Jarvis Jones is going to be the next James Harrison in that defense. He's going to be that havoc-causing guy.
You know, there's a lot of youth going to Pittsburgh this offseason, too, man. You know, people were concerned that the Pittsburgh Steelers weren't going to be any kind of a threat in the AFC North coming up this coming season. But I think people are sadly mistaken because there's at least 17 young guys signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now as we speak. They're working on contracts with these free agents in the NFL draft, of course. There's going to be a lot of young guys and a lot of new faces on that Steelers team. And somehow, some way, the Pittsburgh Steelers always seem, you don't hear them being in a rebuilding year for 3 or 4 years in a row.
Well, here's the thing, LG. Even if you think that the Browns did good, okay, let's say that Mingo turns out to be really good. Let's say Leon McFadden is a starting corner. He doesn't have to be great. Let's just say that you got yourself 2 starters and a couple of backups and a couple of picks for next year. Okay, let's say that you're happy with that. I still think the Browns might have gotten the worst, even if that's good. I think they might have been the worst of the 4 teams in the AFC North. Now, that's not saying bad against the Browns as much as, man, I think all 3 of the other teams in the North really drafted well this year. So even if you think the Browns did good, so did everybody else who was already ahead of the Browns. So you're still playing catch-up, even if the Browns draft works out, because I think the Bengals, like you said, the Steelers and the Ravens also, like the Steelers, they find those guys that just fit those holes. I think they might have drafted the next Ed Reed. You know what I mean? They really drafted well this year.
And I'll tell you, man, you know, a lot of people were thinking they were going to see a changing of the guard in the AFC North. I mean, you heard it a lot, didn't you, J-Rock? I'm not making this shit up, man.
You might still, but they're not going quietly. I'll tell you that. Pittsburgh isn't just rolling over and saying, hey, you're going to take over the division, because, as you can see, they're working, you know, they drafted well, like I said. And Cincinnati, too. Cincinnati, I think they're putting together an offense for next year. I mean, now with the 2 tight ends to go with A.J. Green, oh, man, I think they're going to be lethal on offense.
Yeah, and they were a pretty good football team last year, man. I mean, they made it into the playoffs. They didn't go very far, but they made it into the playoffs. And I think the AFC North is...
Think about it. Even if the Browns improve, man, everybody else in the North got better, too.
Yeah, I tell you, man, I don't know if we're going to have a winning season coming up. I'm a little disgusted about that. You know, everybody thinks LG...
I think the Browns want to have a winning season, LG. I think they've got themselves right where they want to be. I think they want to go out there and be, like Joe Banner said, they want to score some points, they want to get some sacks and some turnovers, they want to be exciting, they want to let Brandon Weeden play, they want to see if he's any good. But they've set themselves up. If Brandon Weeden is not their guy, or if they don't like what they see, they've set themselves up to draft whichever quarterback they want in next year's draft. So I think that's what they were going for, is flexibility at that quarterback position.
Well, you're going to, you know, even if Brandon Weeden is the guy, how many years does Brandon Weeden have it in him to be that guy? You took a guy that was...
You give him a good offensive line. I mean, look, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, those guys are playing into their 40s now, late 30s, 40s.
Yeah, but this is no...
Let's just pretend Weeden turns out to be a very good quarterback. If you keep him healthy, he could play for another 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, but one thing about Brandon Weeden that people forget about is this big-time shoulder injury he brought with him from Major League Baseball. One of the reasons he gave, you know, Brandon Whedon, I mean, let's face it, every NFL player is one hit away from a career-ending injury. Brandon Whedon already is a half a hit away. We've seen him leave with a shoulder injury in Denver last year, J-Rock. You know, everybody wants to complain about Colt McCoy. He wasn't durable. He can't finish a season. Technically speaking, Brandon Whedon didn't finish his first football season with the Cleveland Browns either. Right or wrong, J-Rock?
Oh, you're right. See, my thing with the quarterback this year, because I was looking at the draft, and I'm like, okay, you got, E.J. Manuel kind of intrigued me. You had Nassim, who I really thought they were going to jump on there right before the Giants jumped up on that pick. But you had a couple guys, and you obviously had Geno Smith. But let me ask you, LG, if you had your choice of one of those guys this year or one more year with Brandon Whedon, and then you get to draft, let's say, Johnny Football or one of those guys, one of those quarterbacks coming out next year, wouldn't you rather take another year of Brandon Whedon and then get a quarterback that is going to be the next really good quarterback?
Well, absolutely, because, I've said it, I've written it. I mean, you can go on the ClevelandSports360.com website and you can look up all the articles. There was no franchise quarterback in the 2013 NFL draft. End of the story. There wasn't a guy worth taking in the first round of the draft, and we saw that. We saw the disappointment on Geno Smith's face, even though he was one of the best quarterbacks on the collegiate level last year. And then today they let Tim Tebow out of New York. There's 5 quarterbacks in the New York camp.
New York, that's crazy that. I mean, first off, look at those idiots whose mock draft had Geno Smith going number 6 to the Browns. I mean, there was no chance that anybody was taking him in the first round. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe that people thought that, but
there wasn't a quarterback.
Amazing. It had to be the Jets that drafted him into that circus over there.
Absolutely, and the head ringleader is Rex Ryan himself. I find it hard to believe Rex Ryan stays employed in the New York Jets organization.
And then they traded Revis and drafted poor Miller, who a lot of people wanted to come here, and it's easy to say poor dude that's going to make $10 million. But the poor guy now has to walk right into that island, and it's just the Jets are just bad. You think the Browns are bad, the Jets are just fun.
And I don't see it getting any better in New York either, because they're still up in the air, even with releasing Tebow today. Now, what do you think of this? We're going to switch gears a little bit. We had the first NBA player come out as gay this afternoon, Jason Collins from the Washington Wizards. Don't you think it's kind of peculiar, J-Rock? Here's a guy that's been playing in the NBA for 12 seasons. He comes out today at the end of, what's really the end of the NBA other than the playoff teams, and he announces he's gay. Can you imagine what would happen to the Washington Wizards if they try to cut this guy now, man?
Well, no, because then you're discriminating the opposite way. You know what I mean? They don't want special treatment either. I mean, he's going to get judged on his talent. I know what you're saying, but
what a PR nightmare, though.
I talked about this on the show months ago with some of the rumors and the possible innuendos of anti-Teo and things like that. And I said, man, it's going to come. One of these guys who actively plays right now, that's the way it's going to build, too. Because if you don't think that there's gay athletes in every sport, there is. There's no doubt about it. And it's going to start with like this. First, it starts with a former player, like Amici, when he came out after he left the NBA. Then now you've got a current guy, but he's not a star, and he's not a big name. That's the next step. Next is the first star player who comes out of the closet, and I think that'll be big too. But I don't think it's as big a deal as you think on the PR side.
The only big deal I'm saying is
get hazed in the locker room or something.
Right. The only thing I'm saying is the guy's been playing in the NBA 12 years, J-Rock, and let's face it, in the NBA, 12 years is a pretty darn good career. In any professional sports, if you did it for 12 years, you've had a very substantial career. You beat a lot of odds. So if the guy's got diminished talents, all I'm saying is coming out now after 12 years of playing in the NBA, and if the team did cut him, let's just say, what a PR nightmare that would be. Even if that was nothing to do with being gay, it was just a matter of his diminishing skills, because after 12 years, let's face it, he's not an everyday player. He's a role player. He comes in, he does, but if you're going to cut him, you're going to hear some backlash from the press and the media. You just got to put that where it really belongs, and what a quagmire they got themselves into as far as I'm concerned, man.
Yeah, I don't know that. The only reason I don't think that's really going to be a problem is he's played for 12 years. He's been cut however many times. I'd have to look at his total career, but all these other times he was cut, nobody knew he was gay. So you've kind of got a pattern there where I don't think – I know what you're saying. I think, if anything, it extends his career. I'm sure he doesn't want to be that, but, you kind of now become, a bit of a media magnet for a while at least.
Well, let's switch gears again. I just wanted to bring that up because that was a little interesting news, and we talked a little bit about Tebow.
I think it's groundbreaking, though. I do, and I'm telling you, even more is going to be when the first star player, plus the first NFL player, because that's such a manly, grunty, brute sport that I think it's going to be really interesting when the first NFL player comes out.
Well, you remember back in the day, there was rumors about Tom Cousineau and the Cleveland Browns back when Cousineau was an active Browns player, but who the hell knows what to believe. But let's talk about this offensive line of the Cleveland Browns. J-Rock, we don't have a lot of depth on the offensive line, and I found it interesting. You mentioned we got to be able to protect Brandon Weeden, who's going to be 30 years old shortly after this next NFL season begins. What do you think that the Browns should have did different? There was a lot of offensive tackles taken in the first couple draft picks. Do you think the Browns maybe could have utilized the sixth pick to get another offensive lineman, or do you think that we didn't need that, man?
No, if they traded back, I would have been fine with a Chance Warmack or somebody like that, because, or even some of the second-tier guards, because that's where they're thin. They need guards. You don't know how Jason Hickson's going to come back, and, with the blood clot, even though he's clear right now, you don't know how that's going to work out. I think they're good at the tackles. I mean, obviously you got Joe Thomas, and I think Mitchell Schwartz, is a good draft pick from last year. But they need some help, and you've got Mack in the middle. So the guards is where you're weak. But I do think that I got to say, actually, protecting the quarterback last year was their strong suit. Pass protection was good. They need run block. They need to learn how to run block better.
Well, there was a fantastic job protecting. Colt McCoy never had half the protection Brandon Weeden had. So now we got this Garrett Gilkey in the 7th round of the NFL draft, and he's a big boy, J-Rock, like 6'6", 313 pounds. The only thing that worries me is if Weeden can throw the ball over the guy's head if he stood up, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I got to be honest. I see that as a practice squad guy at best, because the biggest knock on him is the level of competition that he played against, and the few times he played against competition considered a little bit higher caliber, he kind of got pushed around a bit. I think he's one of those guys that is an impressive college guy based on the competition that he plays, but I think as big as he is, that's nothing in the NFL, and I could see him he might surprise me, and there's always those guys, but being such a late draft pick like that, I could see him being more developmental guy, put him on the practice squad, and if things thin out at the end of the season, maybe he gets a shot, but I don't see him.
And don't forget, Tom Brady was not an early round draft pick either, man.
No, that's true, but he was a 6th round, I think when you get into the 7th round, what is the percentage? Maybe 4% of those guys ever, make the NFL, in the 7th round, so.
Well, since I haven't talked to you in a while, J-Rock, and you haven't been on the Cleveland Sports 360 show lately, let me ask you one more question before we let you go, man. What do you think of Mike Brown coming back and taking over the head coaching position vacated by the firing of Byron Scott, man?
All right, I'm all for it. I don't care how much heat I take for this, because I don't think Mike Brown should have got fired to begin with.
He should not have.
We all know that he was the sacrificial lamb in the feeble attempts to keep LeBron James and all of that stuff that went down. But I truly believe, and I'll tell this to anybody, if you have got Mike Brown back, that's great. Tell me who you wanted that was going to come here. All the players, of all the coaches that were going to be available, that were going to come to Cleveland, Mike Brown stood head and shoulders above the rest. And if your only concern should be the best coach coaching the Cavs, and he's the best coach that can coach the Cavs right now. Maybe somebody better comes along later, but he wasn't there right now.
Right, right. And I like Mike Brown, too. And, you know, there was a guy that took the Cavs to the playoffs, and a lot of people say, well, that was with LeBron. You know, I don't think LeBron liked Mike Brown as much because Mike Brown made those guys play defense, and everybody wants to be a hot dog star in the NBA.
You heard the press conference, LG. Mike Brown said the things that every Cavaliers fan wished LeBron James would have said and felt about this. And he's not even from here, but about this area and how he feels about this area and wanting to win for Cleveland. And it's heartfelt. He's not just saying it's heartfelt, you know. I mean, I'm telling you. And I think the guy's coming back with a resolve. He learned. His first head coaching gig was under the specter of the biggest potential future star in the NBA history. LeBron James was the next phenomenon coming up, and nobody knew how to handle that. And Mike Brown, already being a rookie head coach, and now he's dealing with this, and Mike Brown and Dan Gilbert puts him on the clock. And hey, it's a big boy's business, and that's what you get paid to do. But I think he learned from that. And then he went and coached Kobe Bryant and saw that dysfunctional thing out there in L.A. But he saw that environment. And I think he comes to Cleveland now with a totally different outlook on that. I'll tell you now, Mike Brown would never handle LeBron James in the past like he did. He would handle him totally differently because now he knows what didn't work.
I like Mike Brown. I think good things are going to come to the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're going to have some decent draft picks coming up. We got waiters. We got
teach Kyrie Irving how to play some defense.
Yeah, we got, you know, look at the guys we got. Tristan Thompson's a heck of a defensive player, and you know, with Mike Brown coming in, everything's going to be fantastic. So, hey, J-Rock Daddy.
I'll tell you right now, I'm saying it on the Cleveland Sports 360 show. Not even knowing who they're going to draft and what free agents they're going to sign. Just looking at these guys like Dion and Kyrie and Tristan Thompson and Zeller and Anderson if he's healthy. These guys are long and athletic as can be. Mike Brown is going to turn these Cavs into a top 5 or 10 defense by next season. I'm telling you, watch the difference in these Cavs, how they play defense next year.
It's going to be fantastic. Well, J-Rock Daddy, I can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Cleveland Sports 360 show, and I look forward to you joining us again, man.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. I feel like I kind of took your show over a little bit. As you can tell, I've missed being on the air, man. I had a lot to say, but I really appreciate you having me.
Well, J-Rock, there's 3 chairs right next to me right now, empty microphones. You're welcome to come down and do a show with me anytime you feel like doing it. Just give me some advance notice, okay? And,
yeah, we're going to talk. We're going to get some stuff going, LG.
That'd be fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, my buddy J-Rock Daddy, the man himself from the Sports Fix. You can like his Sports Fix page. What are you up to, about 11,667? Give me the number, J-Rock.
Something that's about right, man. The Sports Fix. That's it. Facebook.com/sportsfix.
There you have it, folks. Well, thanks a lot, J-Rock. We're going to cut you loose. I want to get one more caller in before the end of the show, and God bless you, man. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, LG. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
All right. Switch over, Leaf. We got another call coming in, man. Hello, Cleveland Sports 360 show. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was J-Rock from the Sports Fix. Every Saturday night he used to do it from 9 to the witching hour of midnight. Now you're going to catch him hopefully on streamingsportstalk.com. So we talked a little bit about the Browns draft, the Cleveland ownership situation. And joining me live right now all the way from Memphis should be my buddy, my former co-host that came and did a show with us live before, Joe Moneco. Joe, are you with us?
I am, LG. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic, Joe. You sound great down there in Memphis. How's things going down there in Tennessee for you, man?
That's great. It's been like a slow spring here, but you know, I mean, it's the weather's been great some days. I mean, it's things are in full bloom here right now, and it's trying to fight its way to to springtime. So
now, Joe, you being
nice
You being in Tennessee, and obviously we're up here north in Ohio, your former home state, are you privy to more newspaper articles or more things happening with Jimmy Haslam, with this court case that took place in Knoxville today to get the restraining order? Have you heard any news, breaking news, anything at all going on down there with Jimmy Haslam?
Not at the moment, only the fact that, that the judge put a restraining order, that didn't stop that restraining order on his, I guess, paying back his former customers that were caught in that rebate. But that's all I've heard today.
But the judge denied the restraining order, right?
Correct. He denied a restraining order, so he's still, I guess, trying to pay back his former customers.
He's allowed to contact them, and he can continue to contact them. So what is the Haslam name down there in Tennessee? I mean, obviously, you have a governor with the same last name, which is Jimmy Haslam's brother. How well respected is the Haslam family in the Tennessee area? Can you shed any light on that, Joe?
Well, for the short time that I've been here, I mean, and prior to any knowledge other than, Jimmy being the owner of the Browns, I mean, his brother's been governor here. And he's, for the short time that I've, seen things, things have been good down here. But the thing that unfortunately happened here is just bad for Browns fans, and I'm sure he feels bad, of going through all this, especially being a new NFL owner for the first time. But hopefully this whole thing gets rectified, and we don't have any problems here, with our ownership here.
Well, in case you people don't know it, I'm on the phone with Joe Moneco all the way down in Memphis, Tennessee. Joe came and co-hosted a couple Cleveland Sports 360 shows with me, LG, your host. And Joe is pretty much expert when it comes to the Cleveland Indians. Now, Joe, obviously yesterday we saw two different performances by two different starting lineups for the Cleveland Indians in Kansas City. The first game, Justin Masterson took it on the chin and lost his second loss of the season. So he's 4-2 now, but we lost 9-0. And then the Cleveland Indians offense came a little bit alive in the second game and showed them that we can still do it. And they beat him with Kluber on the mound. He got his second win and a win of 10-3. Now tonight, Ubaldo Jimenez takes to the mound in Kansas City, and I'm a little worried, Joe. Which Jimenez do you think's going to show up, man?
I think tonight he's going to show up. He's going to show up and give a solid performance tonight. The thing that's really been hurting the Indians. Yeah, the starting pitching has been hurting them early on in the season, but what now is really killing them is situational hitting. And when there's guys on base and they're not knocking them in or not going to run here and there. Like Friday night's game when they lost 3-2, they had the bases loaded, I believe twice in the early part of the game, and they couldn't knock in any runs. That's hurting them right now. And putting consistent string of wins together, you need a starting pitching and the hitting to come together. But the hitting right now is just like you'll score 10 runs, 15 runs, and then they don't score any runs or, low-scoring games.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And we were the kings at taking the one-run games before. Now we're missing that offense. Hey, what do you think's going on with Jason Kipnis this season? I noticed just the other day, he's standing at home plate, swings at the third strike. The catcher loses track of the baseball. It rolls almost all the way back to the backstop by the grandstands, and Kipnis is just standing there. What is going on with Jason Kipnis right now, man?
From what I've seen in the games that I'm seeing down here and watching him and trying to follow stuff up, from stories that are coming up from there, and I don't know if he's not healthy yet. I don't know if he's, I know he was hurting on the spring training. I don't know. Offensively, he looks like from the outside looking in a window. He's not comfortable at the plate, and he's not, like he was last year. His defense is playing well. But he is not his offensive game at the plate is not happening.
And you remember last year, after the All-Star break, especially the last month of the season, Kipnis was in a slump then too, Joe. And I'm wondering if possibly a trip down to AAA could wake this guy up a little bit, man. What's your thoughts on that?
LG, I was thinking the same thing a couple of days ago. I thought the best thing would probably be for him to go down there and shift the Mires over to second base. And keep ACAB at short, and then let him just think down there and just get his hitting, his timing. Maybe he being injured in spring training, maybe he just really couldn't get in the pocket or in the groove to be able to get in the hitting sync going, and maybe he needs that.
Yeah, because when this guy is on, he's obviously one of the best hitters in the Indians lineup, and we can't continue to see a struggling Kipnis game after game, and I'm a little bit concerned. I think a trip down to AAA could be the best thing that could happen, man. So what do you think? The team's off to a little bit of a slow start, I want to say. We're in the cellar already of the American League Central. We got about a minute left, Joe. Give us what do you think that this team needs to do to be a more consistent ball club, man?
I think the hitting will come around. I mean, they're good hitters, but I just think it's an opportunity. It's early April here. It's April, and there's a chance to mesh together. And I think that'll happen as it warms up. But I mean, the starting pitching. I mean, it was great to see Kluber pitch well last night.
I was impressed.
He had no walk for 7 innings.
Right, I was impressed with that, man.
Yeah, I mean, that was the statistic I looked at, and I just feel maybe he might be in a 4th spot. But there's a lot of fans that are all complaining about Carlos Carrasco. You got to remember, in spring training, everybody was following that his control was wild.
Right.
And you're coming back from Tommy John surgery. That's kind of expected, but I really don't think he was throwing at Euclid when you were playing against the Yankees, and I don't think he was. But it's just...
He'd be stupid to do it after what happened to him last year, I thought they jumped the gun a little bit on that, and you're going to hit somebody once in a while, man.
That's baseball, but I'm saying their starting pitching is the key concern, and with Masterson in a little slump right now, and Jimenez needs to step up, but I mean, Brett Mires, I don't know, my goodness. I don't know. I mean, we made him giving up too many home runs.
We made a mistake there, didn't we, Joe?
Yes, we did. I think Antonetti. How do you get? I mean, you want to take it for example. People were saying how about making Brian Shaw from going from reliever to a starter? Well, you have to take him to Arizona and stretch him out. But how do you take a relief guy like Mires who hasn't even started? Till this year, he's been a relief guy pitcher, and he just, what I'm saying. I mean, I don't think he's gonna be there.
Coming into the season, the biggest concern I had with the Cleveland Indians was definitely the starting pitching rotation. We're seeing that concern come real, and I just hope you're right, Joe, and we see the real Ubaldo. We're going to have to end this show tonight with the Cleveland Sports 360 show. I thank you very much for calling in, Joe Moneco, and
anytime, LG.
We'll be back here next Monday. Hopefully we'll have a whole nother week of Indians wins under our belt. We can call back next Monday, Joe, and we'll talk some more Tribe, 10 to 8 next Monday night, man. Okay?
You got it, LG. Thank you so much. And I tell you what, bro, I think that if the Indians can win tonight, that's almost like a 4-game swing, because if they would have got swept, they'd be 7 games out looking out right now.
Absolutely.
So if they can win tonight, it could be 3 games. And I take that coming back.
And not only that, we're winning against a tough team that has some great pitching over there in Kansas City, man.
Yeah, Kansas City looks good so far. I mean, their pitching is strong.
All right, man. Well, God bless you, Joe. We'll see you. Hey, call in Thursday night, Joe, 7 o'clock. The Sports Outreach Ministries. Call in and share your testimony with the guys. They'll love it.
All right, you got it, bro. All
right, man. Thank you. That's it.
LG.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's another edition of the Cleveland Sports 360 show. I want to send a big thank you out to J-Rock Daddy Jerry Meyer from the Sports Fix. And like his Facebook page, the Sports Fix on Facebook. Join us next Monday night. We'll be going back north over the border, talking to some... Leif, we're going to Canada next week, man. You got that? Canadians.
Hey, about up there. Hey, with the Canadians. Hey. Okay, I'm in.
There you have it, folks. Next Monday night, the Fast Pitch Boys will be back from the Diamond Kings all the way up north of Toronto, Canada. And Leaf loves those guys, man. So God bless you all. Tune in Thursday night at 7 for the Sports Outreach Ministries. These guys share the love of the Lord like no others, coming live from Streaming Sports Talk. Friday night, the Russell Reed Show, 7 o'clock p.m., followed by the You Gotta Be Frickin' Kidding Me show right here on StreamingSportsTalk.com. Sunday nights at 8 o'clock, the Rottweiler Big Jeff Woods on the Ready to Rumble show. God bless you. Take care. Be safe. We'll see you next Monday night right back on the Cleveland Sports 360 show right here, StreamingSportsTalk.com.